I'm Jeff Cook.
And I'm TJ Wilson.
And this is Around the Circle.
I'm walking slowly. I'm taking my time. All I could talking is starting to rhyme. I'm letting go of lonely, letting go of strife. I just can't get enough of this beautiful life.
The Enneagram is a map of the human personality. It's a tool for navigating relationships. It creates language for what motivates us and helps us look at the way we look at everything else. Most importantly, the Enneagram's a mirror because sometimes you need help seeing yourself. My name's Jeff Cook. I'm a longtime professor of philosophy in Greeley, Colorado. TJ Wilson is out today, but I am with my good friend Tyler Zach. Tyler, welcome.
Hello.
That works. Tyler is on a very short list of those in the Enneagram world who are actually moving the ball forward. He routinely brings top thinkers to the table to explore some of the big ideas in Enneagram world, and he shares those conversations on his excellent Enneagram platform where he's doing conferences. And we'll talk more about today we're talking about conferences. But if you don't know, Tyler is actually able to scale the Amazon charts with his 9-book series on Enneagram and spirituality. Brother, I don't know if you know this. You connected me with a person in Colorado, philosophy student. This person raved about your book on sixes for at least 5 minutes of how meaningful it was and how quality it was and how this was the thing that got her into Enneagram moving forward. She bought the book for 5s for her mom. So well done on both the platform and on the books. You're crushing it right now.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that's a really fun story of someone who came on the summit and then got connected to you. And yeah, the books aren't for everyone. They are faith-based, but I do have over 200 citations per book and reference both Christian, non-Christian authors, all the experts out there. And so it's really a curation of the best gold that I could find on each type, and then writing them in a letter format to encourage people, to help them feel seen and known. And so, yeah, I'm grateful that she gave some positive feedback.
Boom. Well, you have another conference coming up in June. You've done conferences on relationships, on spirituality. Give us the lowdown. This is your 4th or 5th. What's the topic? Yeah.
This is going to be the 6th summit.
Ooh.
And so I've done 3 faith-based summits, and then 3 other summits. This is going to be the 3rd summit that's for anyone and everyone on subtypes. And yeah, I'm super excited. The whole goal is to help people discover their subtype, move beyond stereotypes, and help see themselves and others in high definition. So move from kind of confusion to clarity, more general to specific or more nuance. And that's really what you and TJ do so well on, is bringing a lot of nuance to the Enneagram through stances and the triads. All of that is really helpful information to move from the stereotype descriptions to more specific information. And so, yeah, the goal is to take people beyond the surface level Enneagram descriptions and then help you to see how your subtype, and I know that you and TJ have talked about not viewing subtypes as sort of a static thing, but also helping people to see their instincts, their dominant instinct and repressed instinct, and how that shapes their relationships, their behavior, and their unique path to growth. That's what I'm trying to do. And some of those listening might have thought before, I know my Enneagram type, but it doesn't fully explain me. Or I don't relate to others of my same number. Why am I a 9 but don't relate to other 9s? Or am I a 4 but don't relate to other 4s? Or, I just want a more nuanced understanding of the Enneagram so that I can better teach the Enneagram and coach others. And so I think this summit will be really helpful to people who are nodding yes to those things.
Big idea for TJ and I is that you should wait 3 or 4 or 5 years before getting into instincts. We even think that you should jump into Enneagram, do your work and kind of take a break. But when you come back, or when it's time, we use gear shifts quite a bit in our metaphors. Here's another metaphor for gear shifts in terms of instincts. what instincts can do is once you've got your car started, you can shift over into fourth gear, and there's some stuff when you're talking about dominant instincts, repressed instincts, and the rest. It really will move the Enneagram conversation into a faster speed. I'm jumping ahead of my script, but my beautiful wife got a chance to be on the 3 panel. She has not been really talking much about Enneagram over the last couple of years. We have it commonly as part of our vocabulary, but in terms of interest, in terms of energy, in terms of, like, I heard her in the other room talking to one of my children about instincts and the conversation that she was having with my child's girlfriend, and it was just alive in a way that I hadn't heard before. And so I think you're doing, so as we jump in, that's what you should expect is, one, many of you who listen to the Around the Circle podcast have been doing this for a while, and many of you are familiar with instincts. We are going to be jamming the gear shift, as it were, into fourth gear and going fast here. So if that's for you, great. If that's not yet for you, that's entirely fine. Our best work is at the Start Here podcast anyway. Well worth consuming all that material. But we're going to jump into this. Instincts, subtypes. Obviously, you're the one curating this conversation. Why now? Why jump into this topic now?
Because it was highly demanded. I asked thousands of people, what do you want to learn about? What do you want to talk about? And the overwhelming majority said subtypes. A lot more people are writing on it. There's some books that have just come out, like Stephanie Barron Hall, whom you've had on your show, just came out a book, and she wrote a lot about subtypes in her book. I know of another author who's writing a book on instincts in relationships and marriage that's coming out. So it just seems like a lot of people are talking about it. I think they're ready to go deeper. And so that's why I'm doing it, is because people asked for it. But I know that it can be very, very confusing. And so I've tried to kind of lay out a 4-day track to make it as simple as possible. I have Ian Cron coming on to talk about the power of knowing your subtype. And then Beatrice Chestnut and Iranio Pius are going to be doing master classes on like the 27 subtypes. And then Iranio Pius is going to be doing a master class on the instincts. So whether you come from the view that the subtypes are more static and more defined, or you and TJ's view, where we want to look at the instincts first and see them as gears of what your life looks like when you have the social gear or pulled, or the sexual or self-pres gear. That there's a lot of fluidity. There's a lot of openness to having both of those views from the people that I've interviewed. So I think everyone will kind of feel safe and at home. And listen, there's a lot of diversity on this. And one of the things that really stood out to me early on was how much disagreement there is among some of the old, especially the old guard of Enneagram teachers. Things are pretty cordial. People are pretty respectful in the Enneagram world of each other. But when it comes to like subtypes and instincts, I've got the chance to interview some of the old guard, so to speak. And there's people saying like, well, this person thinks that my view is harmful and vice versa. And there's just a lot more just disagreement on subtypes and instincts. And so I just think it's helpful to hold our views lightly. Even if you look at Echazo and Naranjo, like they were changing terms in real time as they were using the Enneagram with people. And so I know that's one of the juicier things that I'd love to talk about with you is like language and where we got language on instincts. Where did this come from and how has it evolved? And
I got opinions, by the way.
And then you got, I was able to interview the Art of Growth guys whom you've had on your show, and also Mario Sikora, who have just been changing language in the last few years because they've been working in the business world. Both of those guys, the Mario Sikora and the Art of Growth guys, have been working in the business world for a long time, and they felt the need to adapt language on instincts in order to be more effective with the people that they're working with. And so it's not just they're not changing language just to be edgy, but they're doing it because they're trying to serve the people that they're helping. And I really respect that. And I respect people who've been doing this for a long time. So yeah. Where do you want to go with that?
Well, Twofold. Off mic, I routinely talk to Enneagram folks about waves and waves of scholarship and waves of just generational interpretations of Enneagram. And I feel like we're ending what has been a very important wave. It's very much a popularizing wave. Cronenstabile in particular, having a book that sells a couple million copies or whatever. And it's out there in the zeitgeist. And what ended up happening is a lot of people connected with the material came in, and then it started to get interpreted by new people who, as you were kind of saying, may have very different backgrounds and may have very different target audiences when they start teaching. Those familiar with our podcast, we're trying to make this intellectually, viable. And we're trying to make this something that those who are intellectual can actually say, oh, okay, I can see how that's a worthwhile place to land. There's some people who are doing it for the spiritual, really pushing into the spirituality side, Buddhist spirituality, Christian spirituality. And then there's some on completely the opposite side. I need to dress this up in language that business people use because I need it to be something that businesses purchase and bring me in to do team building exercises with Enneagram. And so I think we're splintering in some ways in terms of the audiences that we have and dare we say, the motive that the Enneagram teachers have when coming to talking about motive. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah. To try to simplify things and not be overly confusing to the majority of people, especially because there's a lot of newbies that always come on the summit who don't know their Enneagram type yet or are newer. So I'm really mindful of that. And I went with Beatrice and Naranjo because they're very highly respected, and they got their subtype description straight from Claudio Naranjo. And so I kind of went with that. But then I also brought in some people like the Art of Growth guys and Mario Sikora and the narrative tradition to talk kind of about their views so that we have a little bit more diversity of views and allow people to kind of see the full picture and kind of make their own decision on subtypes and instincts. Yeah. And Ian Cron said this in his interview that we'll be showing at the summit, but he reminded us of the quote from George Box that said, all models are wrong, but some are useful. And I think that's helpful when it comes to subtypes.
Postmodern way to come to the topic.
Just think you could be wrong. Right? I could be wrong when it comes to instincts or subtypes, and to hold your view a little looser, and definitely don't push it on other people, because this is one area that's not wet. That's still kind of wet cement, and just be careful and be cautious of that.
No, any discipline that's a live discipline is going to have people putting forward their take, their theory, and opening it up. And especially in a discipline that isn't dealing with hard facts, as it were. It's going to be loose. So, I don't have any problem with that. I am a philosopher. That's what we do. We want to see the 20 different takes on God. We want to see the 20 different takes on ethics. We want to name them, elevate them, debate them, pull them apart, say, does so-and-so have a worthwhile point? So personally, I have no interest in making this thing uniform. I think uniformity is boring, and it would be terrible if there was one Enneagram teacher that everybody was saying, well, Al says, and then it just silenced conversation. Boring.
Yep. Yeah. So let's go back a few decades and talk about language a little bit. So Oscar Ichazo, is the one who created the 9 points in the 60s. He was teaching it, and then he eventually taught it to Claudio Naranjo. But Ichazo's name for what we call the sexual or one-to-one instinct was syntony. That was the very first word for it. And it meant an emotional harmonization with either others or the environment. So it was had a broader focus than sort of this one-to-one intensity. It was like a harmonizing, trying to harmonize yourself with the energy in the room, so to speak.
Real quick on that, he's not taking that idea then from biology, like the gentleman from the Art of Growth want to say, look, these are biological categories, social, sexual, and self-preserving. But you're saying originally in terms of Enneagram overlap, there was a different move?
That is a Naranjo thing, I believe. Maybe a Chazo, but we don't have less information from a Chazo than Naranjo.
Yeah.
But yeah, his words were conservation, relation, and synteny. So conservation was for self-preservation, relation was for social, synteny was for what we call sexual. And so that he was trying to get after this idea of harmonizing or becoming in tune with the energy in the room, either with people or in environments. But then later he's like, that doesn't quite capture it. And so he changed the word from synteny to adaptation, sort of adapting yourself to the energy in the room or the environment. And then when Naranjo came along, he changed it to sexual. So he was the one that actually was the first one to give it that sexual, because he thought it was more than harmonizing with the room. He thought there was this intensity aspect to it, zooming in on certain individuals, and then also like kind of the reproduction. He was trying to build that into, there was sort of a reproduction aspect to the sexual. And then in my interview with Peter O'Hanrahan from the narrative tradition, he said that they were the first to come up with the one-to-one language. So it's just helpful to kind of know that. Because sometimes you think, well, these terms that I'm using have been around from centuries, or like this is the term. It's like, well, no, the narrative tradition just kind of came up with a one-to-one. Doesn't mean we need to keep using it, but that's what they kind of landed on. Yeah.
So, Tyler, you'll know this. I'm married to a historian who's a 3. You're a 3. You're taking in the world through your heart center, pushes you into the past. And I love the desire for history that comes out here. For myself, the longevity of the Enneagram does not matter at all to me. What does matter, and this ends up being, like, I find very interesting as you're talking, is I think the Enneagram is discovered. And that, for me, is much more important. It's in the same way you can't see music, but you can listen to the chords and identify the chords, and then begin to bring music theory to talk about how music functions. You can't see goodness, you can't see morality, but you can bring ethical theory to the table and say, this is when we talk about goodness, when we talk about what's right and wrong, good and bad, this is what's taking place. You can't see knowledge, but you can talk about, this is what counts as a fact, this is what counts as data, this is what counts as understanding, this is what counts as opinion. Long story short, it seems to me like knowledge, music, and ethics, what is actually taking place is, as you're talking about subtypes and Enneagram as a whole, is it's like, okay, how do we understand these invisible things? Because so many of us connect with them. They so thoroughly describe our inner life. And so out of this tradition, as you start naming authors or thinkers, people who have been influential, that's what I'm hearing. It's like, here are early experiments in bringing language to the table that describes this focus of focusing in on motive and how do we talk about it in a theoretical framework. Am I wrong there?
No, it's good. That's really good. Yeah, I did a whole e-course on the history of the Enneagram. So
which is very good, by the way, and those interested should definitely, is that where, real quick, website, your website where that's at is what?
Oh, tylerzoch.com/history.
Bang. Well, I'll put that in the show notes.
There are some spiritual components to it, because what I was trying to do is trying to create it for an audience that was being told that the Enneagram was demonic, and
is that not true?
But it's relevant to everybody, because I kind of go through ancient sources, Middle Ages. I try to go on a hunt to find out if this thing is ancient or not, and I found that it's not ancient. That Chazo was the first one to create these 9 points. That he took Gurdjieff's symbol as a template for the 9 points, and then it went from there. And Chazo was doing the best he could to come up with 9 archetypes or categories of patterns of human behavior. And then we've just been continuing to work that out ourselves as Enneagram coaches and teachers and authors. And so it's just an evolving thing. It's a thing like that continues to grow and to build upon other ideas, and just we're moving into new territory all the time with the work that we're doing, and it's pretty cool.
I'm jumping into places where you're scratching itches that I have. It's like, I want to comment on that, as opposed to really elevating what is some fantastic work that you're doing upcoming. And I've already seen some of it. One of the big things in your summit is that you're doing panels, which I am longing to see more panels. These are very well done, in which you're bringing, 5 to 6 people who are the same type, but they're talking about the diversity of instincts. What's been your experience of these panels so far?
Yeah, I really respect the narrative tradition for really emphasizing panels and stories and having, it's a lot of work. I can see why it's why there aren't a lot of panels, because trying to schedule 48 people in like a month to get everyone together for these is really challenging. Really challenging. I have like a spreadsheet of like 70 names that we started with, and then we were able to finally get 48 committed. And a lot of them are Enneagram coaches and people who've been around the Enneagram for a while, so they know their stuff. And it's been really fascinating, especially for me. I talk about 4s with us that are social dominant, or sexual 4s, or self-present 9s. And to actually see these people in the flesh and hear their stories now has like been ingrained in me. And so now every time I'm going to be talking about instincts, I'm going to be thinking of faces and stories, and it's helpful. So I think that'll be one of the best parts of the summit that people will really enjoy. And you can see the diversity among the types on this panel. And so for example, your wife was on the 3 panel with me,
which is, by the way, the 3 panel, that's the best panel. Yeah.
yeah.
It was the most impressive of all the panels.
Yeah. One of the 3s, it was so funny, like name dropped that she was ghostwriting a book for Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
And
just gotta slide that in there.
But it was great because your wife is a social dominant 3. And so she said, she loves winning and loves winning board games and doesn't want to let the kids beat her. Like, she wants to win every single time. Whereas me and Caitlin Schweiss, we're the self-preservation 3s. And we're like, no, actually, we'd prefer winning by losing. We'd prefer to lose the board game in order to win our kids' admiration. For helping them to feel good about themselves. And it was totally different. Like, we are not competitive in the sense that social 3s are, or those who are dominant in the social instinct. So you could, even see the differences there. And I could go on to show. Another great example is Enneagram Ashton, who's a pretty well-known influencer on Enneagram.
We're interviewing her next month.
Oh, great. Ashton Whitmore Ober. She thought she might be a sexual 2, or lead with the sexual instinct. And as she was going through the material, then she got on the panel with other sexual 2s, and she's like, "Oh, no, I'm definitely not. I'm definitely lead more with the social instinct," because the sexual 2s that got on there were just like intense and, like one of them said, whenever they meet their friends, they're like, "How's your sex life?" Just like, let me get into the nitty gritty with you and just talk about these deep things with you.
Deep relational things.
Yes. They're just dropping, bombs like that. And then, got Ashton there like, whoa, that's not me at all. And so it's really helpful to see the panels look at each other and think, wow, okay, I'm definitely different than you. And also on the 2 panel was Lisa's son, who's a therapist. And he was saying things like, I hate intruding on other people. I never intrude on people with trying to be helpful to them. And I always ask for permission, and I feel icky if I ever come off as intrusive. So I'm always telling people, hey, if you need me, I'm here. But I'm really respectful of boundaries. And that is the way someone who leads with self-preservation, that's different than what we hear. We always hear when we teach that 2s aren't good with very good with boundaries. They're kind of intrusive with their help. But if you had like Jeremy sitting in a Enneagram presentation, he'd be like, well, maybe I'm not a 2 because that's not me. That's another example of why these panels are helpful.
One of the things, okay, so Tyler will know this. We were hoping to release just a little book this summer on instincts. When we started doing the study, what we ended up finding was how much the instincts cause balance in the type. For some, that one of the instincts allows your type to balance its motive and not move into excess. When we found that, we were like, we need to actually put that into our book series instead. So some of you will know our third book is on balance. So we're going to do our deep dive into the instincts here in 2 years. But that was, as you're saying that, that's what hits me, is that what often happens is we discover that in moving into excess, something happens, something breaks, or the relationships aren't necessarily working, whatever our motive might be, why we need to kind of pull back from excess in our motive, and we can push into that space. And you're exactly right, twofold. One, to name that, but two, to say, when we do typing with folks, oftentimes we are bringing up the excessive face of a type and saying, do you look like this excessive 3? Do you look like this excessive 4? And many people may have done the work prior to already balance. And so they're like, well, that's not really me anymore.
Yeah. And the way that Lisa talks about it when she facilitates these is she says, in every type, there's the stereotype that often gets taught. Then there's the variant that's sort of in between, and then there's the counter type. So that's kind of
great.
That's kind of
that's great language.
That's kind of the spectrum.
Say that again. Stereotype,
variant, the variant, and then the counter type.
Is that hers?
I've talked with her a little bit about it.
Can I put that in a footnote? Can I give her credit for that? Because that's stellar.
Yeah. So for like the 6s, the social 6 is the variant. So you have the self-preservation 6, that's sort of the stereotype, the fear-based 6. And then you have the social 6, who's the variant, who can go counterphobic, be very certain, kind of like counterphobic 6s, the sexual 6s, but they're a little more reserved, and they don't attack people like sexual 6s, but they come after you with questions, because they want to be certain. And then, the sexual 6s and then are the counter type, because they don't look like they have any fear at all. And one panelist that you guys have to go listen to coming up here is David French. So he's a New York Times columnist.
Wait. The New York Times?
The New York Times, yes.
This also, when I saw that you had this person who I read on your panels, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Tyler, swinging big.
Well, he's like confusing to a lot of people. He helped defend his church as a lawyer when they were getting attacked and couldn't meet in a certain place. But then also now he's very outspoken against Trump and not shy about that, and said that he almost ran for president because he felt a duty for somebody to step up that was going to be different than the candidates that we had. And it was fun watching him kind of go through this process of learning about the sexual or counterphobic 6. He asked his wife and one of his best friends, he's like, do I come off intimidating? Like, this material says that that the sexual 6s can come off intimidating. It's like, I've never thought of myself as intimidating. And both of his wife and his friend are like, oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Right.
And he's like, I'm still dumbfounded. I've never known this about myself. And so it's just fun to see some of those aha moments on the panels. A lot of the sexual subtypes have a common theme. You can kind of go around the circle and see how, like, the Meredith, who's an Enneagram coach and a sexual 8, leads with that sexual instinct. She loves being in the emergency room and working with women who have been abused with that one-on-one, like, let me help you in this emergency situation, in this drastic situation. I'm here for you. Like, you had a sex therapist. It was a sexual 2 who helps people and couples to deal with very intimate, deep parts of the relationship to help them. You have Mike Cosper, another name drop, because I have to, because a lot of us have seen the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. It's an amazing podcast about the rise and fall of Mars Hill, Mark Driscoll. He's a sexual 5, and he talked about how that plays out for him as a 5 in terms of sitting down with individuals, a one-on-one, and getting the deepest, darkest secrets of their life and being able to tell those to the world. So it's really cool to, again, put flesh on some of these concepts that we teach about. If that makes sense?
It does. I think you're highlighting the utility of getting into the instincts here, especially vocationally. We could talk about relationships as well. Maybe we can go down that path. But vocationally, if you can name, this is where my sweet spot is. It's much more one-on-one. I don't thrive in a collective environment. Or I'm just really great when there's a big room and find other people who love the big room. And these are the sorts of atmospheres where I do my best work. And just being able to name that can be incredibly helpful, because a lot of us feel like we're supposed to push into instincts where we're really weak, and that may not be the best move for us. And even though like maybe the job title is really great and the pay goes up, but you are pushing into a space where this is not going to be, where you thrive, that can be instructive. Anyway, thoughts on that? And then I would love to talk about relationships.
Yeah. I mean, I can talk about relationships and how listening to Aranio was super helpful for me. I thought all threes were sort of like me. I just kind of assumed, we're all workaholics. Mm-hmm. And then when you get into the subtypes, and like if the self-preservation instinct is dominant, you are going to double down on your workaholism. Mm-hmm. And so that naturally is going to be one of the things that I'm going to have to work on. It's a growth step for me. If I can identify and name that self-preservation instinct is dominant, then that can help me get to the work quicker of, I need to create more space for my family ASAP, because chances are I'm working way too many hours, because I'm actually comfortable with protecting my time and my space. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not going to be with other people as much as the sexual or social three. In terms of the sexual three, like Lisa Vischer, who's helping me co-host, she's oftentimes with her family. So I, wrote a bunch of books like you mentioned, and I protected that time and said, no one's interfering with that time. Like, I am going to get this done. And so sort of a laser beam focus, which is a superpower, but also I can neglect my family and sacrifice my family to do that. Whereas Lisa, right, as a sexual dominant three, is all about how can I play the perfect role for my family, for my husband, for my kids. How can I be the best mom and wife that I can be? And so she's always putting family first and not getting to the projects that she wants to get to as a three. So she always feels like she's behind because she's not achieving as much as she wants to, but she's spending a lot more time with her family. So you can see even between us two, and I don't know how you would speak in about your wife as a social three, but that just shows like the difference in the growth steps for me and Lisa. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that's a stellar way to think about it. I think to add a social three's perspective, maybe something like, how does my family move? How are they seen in the wider community is a very big deal. But also navigating our family as a society is a, we are four, and there's social energy that covers the four, as opposed to myself. I'm much more, I feel less comfortable when the four of us are together. I'm much more, comfortable with the one-on-one interactions in our family in-house. So
yeah,
it's good.
And sometimes people think of like fives, for example, as being very sort of withdrawn, maybe aloof with their family. But, my own mother is a sexual dominant sexual five. And we had a sexual five on our panel. And the way that she was talking will just blow your mind, because it's not how you would envision a five talking. She's like, when I get around another person, I get like this dopamine hit. And she's like, this deep connection with somebody else is like my dopamine's firing. It's just so like life-giving. And so the way she's talking about it is like, are you a five? Are you sure you're a five? Right. But that's just to that sexual instinct in the five. Again, showing you how radically different you can be from like more of a heady social five, who is really about ideas. And one of the things that came across from the five panel was that The social fives, the social dominant fives, were way more interested in less concrete things, more abstract. I want to solve the biggest problems of humanity, and I want to think about big picture questions. Like one of the women wrote a book called Why Literature, and then you got Phil Vischer, who is a self-preservation five, and he's like very much, I want to figure out how to fix my house. I want to figure out how to make a puppet. I want to figure out how to make these things. Again, very like lots of utility, lots of getting your hands dirty. So you can see the differences even there among fives. And then you can make some connections to how that would play out in relationships as well.
Yeah.
So.
Of all things, the thing that was going through my mind there is how it would apply with the overlap of movement in the Enneagram in general. So with fives who get big picture, the thing that would naturally go through my mind is, they're engaging kind of some high side 7 space there. They're allowing their mind to blow open, and that would be my first move. But I feel like I see this in my child, that a lot of times our stress and security moves overlap with our instincts. And this would take forever to do this study, but just to use my child for example, their movement into self-preservation as an 8 overlaps real cleanly and is almost inextractable from their movement into 5 space, and they compound one another. And being able to name that is, I think, helpful for me in terms of there's 2 things going on here. And that strikes me as what's going on there with the 5 blowing their mind open in terms of here are the huge problems. It's likewise the case that they're getting very much into their 7 space. And I suppose, not to monopolize here, but I feel that with myself, with when I move into 4 space, that actually is a very relational space. And as a sexual 1 myself, I can engage other people's emotions at a depthy level, and I move into a lot of the 4 tools when I go there. Anyway, do you have thoughts on that?
No, what you're saying is great. And I'll just to add to the conversation, I think a lot of the conversations I've had help to eliminate some of the confusion or the oversimplification of instincts. So sometimes people might think of self-pres as the people who want to go hide in a corner. But actually, some of the self-preses are even more warm than social dominant people.
Right.
And Peter Hanrahan said, it might be the self-preservation person who's bringing people over for a barbecue to their house, right? Because they're very comfortable with their close relationships and pour into those close relationships and might want just that feeling of warmth with their loved ones. And so the social dominant person might not be the one throwing the barbecue. And this was confirmed by, the Art of Growth guys and Mario Sikora and all the traditions that, like, the social dominant is often the ones who thinks about, okay, who has power in the room, who doesn't have power, who's included, who's not included, what are the social dynamics happening. And a lot of times they're the ones that are like off to the side, kind of observing the social dynamics and understanding, okay, if I want to belong or if I want to lead this group, then here's kind of how I need to network. And they're thinking about that, but they're not the most like social person in the room taking up space in the room. Yeah. Most of the time it's the sexual dominant, those with the sexual instinct, that are taking up the most space, not the social dominant. Yep. And sometimes they can even neglect, I don't care about politics. I don't care about, going along with what's expected here. I'm going to assert myself. And that's why the Art of Growth guys say that the sexual instinct, they call them hunters. And I kind of like that because it gets away from this kind of one-to-one thing. And they talk about, being hunters, about taking risks, self-expression, right? Taking up space. And so that has been really helpful for me, these conversations, to get away from some of these oversimplification or oversimplified definitions of instincts. Does that make sense?
It does. I think that's profound. I think it points toward what Enneagram ought to point toward, which is your motive. What is your motive for wanting to connect with other people? And for social dominant types, it's not necessarily what we think of as, I want to be part of, a big group, or connect with a big group. I understand the power dynamics so that I can maximize the group for my own survival. And for the self-pres, it's you can lean into relationships as assets that protect you. And to cut to what may seem like a negative spin on it, this is what's going on biologically. You are an animal, and your animal instincts are primarily about getting your body in the right place at the right time, and you can't avoid that. And that comes out in how we commune with others.
Mario calls the sexual instinct transmitting.
Yeah.
So it's about broadcasting and narrowcasting.
Mm-hmm.
Like radio waves, you're sending out, this is who I am, these are my ideas, and then whoever picks up on or receives your signal, then you go to narrowcasting and like zoom in on, I'm going to talk to this person about whatever it is I want to talk about. And that was really interesting hearing him talk about transmitting. And then they're about, he said, asserting, impressing. And so the sexual dominant, he says, they can look like heart types. So it's not that the heart types are the peacocks of the Enneagram that just want to be seen, but all the sexual dominants, when you have that gear pulled, there's a sense of, I'm peacocking. I want my views or my ideas to be seen by the world. So that can help you to see why you might look like a peacock, but you're not a heart type.
Right.
And then for me, I've been able to name how often I avoid risk as a self-preservation dominant. And I always thought of myself as a risk taker. I'm a 3. I'm taking steps of, I'm faith-filled. But no, if I look closer at my instinct, I look very 6-ish quite often, because I do want to avoid risk to protect myself, to protect my resources. And so that's another way that it's helped me to, create more growth steps for my own personal life.
It's another example of going the opposite way with the arrows. Is your self-pres dominant instinct is moving you slightly more towards your security number and employing those tools. Yeah.
And one interesting thing to think about, which would be a great experiment, is say you are sexual dominant 1, Jeff, thinking about your growth moves from like, okay, what does it look like when I move to the sexual 7 space or sexual dominant 7? What does it look like when I move to sexual dominant 4 space? Like, does that give me even more some specific information that I've not thought about before? I've been doing that with myself, and I'm like, oh, that's very interesting to think about that as well. Yeah,
it's excellent. I got 2 questions for you to close this off. One, we got a chance to talk to you about the dominant instincts and the overlap with affect groups. So for those interested, this also is going to be part of our conversation. It's like, how is it that how we connect with the world overlaps with our instinct? And that's why I'm hearing in a lot of this language as well. Specifically when talking about the sexual instinct, I'm hearing, oh yeah, this is how that cuts across each of the types in terms of how they want to connect.
I loved our interview. I loved our conversation because it created all of these pairings that are really helpful for people if they're dominant in certain instinct to think, okay, this is how I might relate to others. And it was super practical, and I really loved it.
Boom. There would be an example of, that's me moving into security. When I put together the maps, big maps of, notice how this interacts with this. In my mind, I'm moving into a very secure space, a very 7-ish space. It's very much a blow my mind open. How wide can we make this sucker? So as you were talking about 5s moving into that space, I feel like they're grabbing 7 tools. When I move into that space, I'm grabbing 7 tools, similar locations that we're landing. And in fact, that's a place where I relate to a lot of 5s, is connecting in some of the spots like that. One of the things that comes out, and I'd be curious how this played out in your panels, is not just each of the type paired with their dominant instinct. But once you name a dominant instinct, there also is another element, and it's which instinct has a support role, has a secondary role, and which one, I don't know what your language is presently for this, but which one is minimized, repressed, weakest. How do you think about that, the sandwich, as it were?
Yeah. Most people, and just even from my own experience, most people tend to look at the instincts and be like, oh, these two feel very strong. I'm not sure which one is my dominant, which one I use more. And that just kind of, from experience, both of us have kind of experienced that. Interestingly, and so Russ Hudson and others talk about balancing the instincts, because there's one repressed, and you got to work on that repressed one because it's negatively affecting your life to not pay attention to it. Like Aranio said, being self-preservation repressed, he oftentimes will not look at the expiration date on his food or milk in the fridge and be like, I need to take care of myself better. And that's one just easy way that it's affecting my life. Whereas Mario has an interesting take. Mario Sikora, he says that he's not interested in balancing the instincts at all.
Right.
He said that there's one that you just neglect. It's a zone of indifference. And kind of like, how the Strengths Finder mentality went, like, don't focus on your weaknesses, just focus on your strengths.
Yep.
That's kind of what I get from him. And he says there's a zone of enthusiasm, which is kind of like your primary instinct they're using. There's a zone of inner conflict, like your secondary instinct is you kind of want to think about it, you want to pay attention to it, but you feel like you're not very good at it, and that creates an inner conflict within you. And then there's a zone of indifference, something that you're just totally indifferent to, and you don't really have to do anything about it. It is what it is. And probably one of the most controversial aspects of his teaching is that he stacks them for you. So rather than being like, I'm sexual, social, self-pres, or self-pres, social, sexual, kind of doing your own stacking, he says in every instance from his observation over the years that the self-preservation dominants have an inner conflict with the social domain and then are indifferent about the transmitting or the sexual domain.
Oh, interesting.
And then the sexual dominants have an inner conflict when it comes to self-preservation, and then a total indifference to the social realm or domain. And then socials have an inner conflict with the sexual instinct, but then a sexual domain, the one-on-one domain, and then are indifferent towards self-preservation. So that's kind of interesting, isn't it?
That's very interesting. I'd be curious if that plays out empirically. You can float that. That wouldn't be that difficult, I suppose, to do a lot of.
I'm just trying it on. I'm like this jacket.
Yeah.
I'm kind of trying that on and not committing to anything too early.
My own take on this, because we had a long conversation with the Art of Growth guys on this in terms of, because we had been advocating for balance. They are in that similar pocket of saying, push into your strengths, corporate guys that they are, push into your strengths, and then pair with other people who do your repressed instinct well. That's how we ought to function as a animal species, is don't make it all about yourself, make it part of the community. And I thought that was interesting. And my present take on this is that your instincts function much more like muscles. You may be really strong in your biceps and chest, but you need to work on your back. That doesn't mean you're taking away from your biceps and chest. It just means that you're working on your back. And so put energy into growing, put energy into being not necessarily well-rounded as though it's a zero-sum game. There are lots of people who are really, really great, both one-on-one and socially, and lo and behold, they can still balance their checkbook because they've developed the habits and patterns to do that, and that makes them a mature person. And that's where I'm landing presently on this whole conversation.
Yeah, there's so many ways you can go with instincts, and we've had so many fun conversations on the summit that people get to register for free and watch. Dr. David Bell comes on and talks about how instincts impact our spirituality, which is really interesting. Joanne Kim comes and talks about the emotional habits of each subtype, she talks about the big 5 emotions, and mad, sad, glad, scared, and numb. And she, from the Inside Out movie, and she swaps disgust for numb. And then she talks about how self-preservation dominants tend to relate to being scared or numb. Social dominants tend to experience sadness or shame. The same's not just for heart types, but shame is experienced by all social dominants because of that not belonging to the group at times. And so that's a fascinating conversation. Melissa Kircher, who you've had on here, is brilliant. Fantastic. And she comes on to talk about what each subtype needs in coaching, and how each subtype needs different things in coaching. Steph Barron Hall, who comes on and talks about subtypes in real life and shares some of her own stories and observations. There's multiple talks on relationships. Peter Hanrahan just focuses on instincts and what does it look like when socials are paired with socials, or socials are paired with sexual dominance, or all the combinations. I know you like doing that kind of work.
Love it.
But there's there's a lot of great conversations, and I'm so excited to be able to invite people to participate after working on this for 4 months. I hope people see it as a gift.
He's Tyler Zach. Tyler is doing, again, in my opinion, some of the best forward-leaning work in Enneagram world. I'm always grateful that you come on, and Tyler has been one of the few people who has actually really championed our work, and we're just extraordinarily grateful. On that, at aroundthecircle.org is a link to the rest of this fantastic summit that he's going to be promoting. This is going to release on what date?
Yeah, June 3rd to the 6th.
Perfect. So we are coming up here real shortly. So I assume people can sign up early if they want?
Yeah, promotion starts May 12th, and people can start registering then. And one cool thing is, if you're I don't know my subtype tests have been really hard. If you can take the IEQ-9 for $60 to $90 or something like that to get an accurate report of your type and then also your instinct. There's very few tests out there that really do a good job with instincts. And one cool thing is that Beatrice Chestnut and Iranio Pius are giving away their test for free to early registrants of the summit. So you can take a $45 test that's very accurate. I took it myself. And if you want to get a sense for your primary Enneagram type and your secondary Enneagram type, and then also report on instincts, what instincts are showing up, you can get that for free when you register for the summit, which is a cool gift.
Boom. We'll link that as well. And I imagine if you have friends who are just getting into the Enneagram and want a very expensive test for free, that might be worthwhile as well. So all sorts of great stuff at aroundthecircle.org in terms of what Zach is bringing to the table. Are there promotion codes for the summit that you're offering?
No, it's free to register. So
free to register.
Yeah. Come on in.
Is that right? You're giving this conference away for free?
It's free during the event, so you can watch each day for 30 hours. You have 30 hours to access all of the daily sessions and panels, so you can watch for 4 days for free. And the only thing you have to pay for is if you want a lifetime pass to all of it. Then you can then that's how I make my money to be able to do this work. So it's my way of doing Patreon. Perfect. You guys. Yeah.
Well, some of Tyler's past work is no joke. There's lots of great stuff on there, and that's fantastic. I didn't realize it was free. Tyler, you're my pal. I'm cheering for your work hard, and I'm always appreciative for your time. You got anything else?
No, I appreciate you, Jeff. Sorry, I'm bummed that TJ couldn't be here today, and that's why I did the hello at the beginning. Was just to shout out TJ.
So, the sign off. You missed your chance for the sign off. Hey Tyler, you got anything else?
Don't type other people.
He's Tyler Zach. Is a gift to us, and I'm Jeff Cook, and who you aren't isn't interesting.